Kia ora koutou. Welcome to HR Chats with me, Te Radar, where we chat all things HR. And today, look, it seems very fitting actually, because I went to school cross country yesterday. What has this got to do with anything? Well, Dr. Joan Ford is not only an award-winning leader, she's ex-army, she's an academic, she's a businesswoman, she's an international speaker, and most pertinent to our conversation, she is a mother. You may be thinking, gosh, I've heard her name before. Well, you did. She was Kiwibank New Zealander of the Year local hero for her incredible role in supporting the evacuation of 563 people from Afghanistan after the fall of Kabul. She's terrifyingly ambitious about changing the working world, and specifically today, hashtag work school hours. It is a revolution for parents and for workforces. Ellen, hello.
Hello.
Hey, look, I was thinking about you yesterday as I stood at cross country and thinking, watching all the kids run around in circles and thinking of how very privileged I was to be a part of the group of parents that were there. Tell us what we're talking about today when I say hashtag work school hours.
Yeah, so thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm so stoked that you were able to go to cross country. So hashtag work school hours, it is a movement because Teresa, I really want the working world to change. Um, I believe in this so passionately that the way we do work can be better. And so that people can actually do great work for their workplaces and do things that are important to them in their personal lives, such as cross country, as you just said. And literally this morning, I went to my little boy Toby's. He had like inter-school tabloid sports. And I thought, this is why I do this. I got to go and see him, see his little smile. He was happy that mum was there. My cup's filled, and now I'm excited to come back and do work.
Absolutely. Now, did this begin once you had children and you suddenly went, hang on a second, because you had a very long career up until now. Was there a kind of a moment where this journey began?
Yeah, so it was, so I'd been in the army, came out of the army and did my MBA and PhD, both focused on leadership. And that's actually fundamentally hashtag work school hours is a leadership movement. It's about, how do we create great outcomes for organizations? And so I'd done that journey and then I became a mum. And as a result of that, or actually not because I became a mum, but I ended up doing the significant piece of postdoctoral research on the experiences of working parents. And I was marinating on that data. I'd spoken to hundreds and hundreds of parents who shared their stories, and they were all dumb. And I remember thinking at that point, it's a really specific point I remember to rate out. I was on parental leave second time round. So I had Toby was 3 at the time, and my little boy Monty, I was still breastfeeding. And I just remember thinking, this is the life ahead of me. I don't like this. I don't want it for me, and I don't want it for anyone else. And so I'm going to do something about it. And that is how hashtag work school hours was born, is my attempt at, I want to change the working world.
And we do need to, we say that workplaces are flexible, but really are they? If we look at the situation now, what's the current problem? Are we operating workplaces on a 100-year-old model that's outdated in a modern society because both parents are working, early childhood is expensive?
That's exactly it. So literally the 9 to 5 or the 40-hour week construct came into play a little over 100 years ago in line with Henry Ford's car manufacturing era. Fantastic progress in its time. But that was based on the assumption that every household has a dedicated worker, typically a man, and a dedicated caregiver of children, the mum. Two different people. So the person that was working 9 to 5 was not the same person that was picking up the kids at 3 o'clock, was not the same person who was with the kids for 12, 13 weeks, school holidays of the year. But that's not our workforce today, and it hasn't been for decades. But we still operate in the same system, which is
Like,
bonkers.
look, it is bonkers, and you've got parents that they're putting their kids into daycare, and they're probably running almost at a net loss, I would imagine, financially, let alone, I guess, that ability to drop the kids off, to go to the school assembly, to go to cross country, to take them to the doctor, all of that kind of thing. What's the solution? Because I bet you
So
thought about it. Clearly, that's why we're here.
I have. So the solution, I really believe this, is hashtag work school hours. Now, it's not as dogmatic as it sounds. So I'm not saying the whole world should turn and work from 9 till 3. We don't want our hospitals to close in the afternoon. That wouldn't be very useful for our society. But it's a set of principles, and there's 3 principles to radar. The first is organizations should do more to value the fact that people have things they care about outside of work. Now, that might be children. That was the genesis for this research, but actually everyone has things they care about outside of work. So that's the first principle. The second one is, how do we do more to focus on outputs? We are so hung up on how many hours did someone do and did they arrive on time and we pay them for their hours. Instead, we should be focusing on the outputs. That's why we employ them in the first place, is to do some things. And so it's focusing on, well, are those outputs being delivered? And the third principle is giving people more flexibility. So not for a second does #WorkSchoolHours suggest that people don't do their work. They must do it, but give them more flexibility so that they can do that great work and do the things that they care about outside of work.
When
And
you're
that, in a
doing
nutshell, is
It's
#WorkSchoolHours.
a great nutshell. Hashtag nicely summated, nicely summated. When you were going through all that kind of the leadership training, and you've done it, oodles of that. What were the conversations around all of this, or were they not really happening in the academic institutes or the leadership world that you were looking at?
So I had some really interesting, varied, and exciting experiences of practicing leadership. I was very lucky. I was an officer in the New Zealand Army, so I got to lead soldiers in New Zealand and overseas. Studying leadership, I'm really passionate in how do we get the best out of people and deliver great outcomes for organizations. And what excites me is the more I've delved into this, I'm so convinced, Tarada, and it's not just me pulling it out of my butt because I think this, it's evidence-based, is so my leadership model is belonging, autonomy, and purpose. And so I believe that a leader's job is to create an environment where their team can thrive and then direct that thriving energy at the task that needs to be achieved. And what people need to thrive is they need a sense of belonging where they can actually bring their full, whole, authentic, unique, a little bit weird self and actually feel they're valued. They need autonomy, and that's sort of one of the big things of #WorkSchoolHours is they need to have some agency and control over their lives. And people need purpose. They need to know that what they do matters. So that is my leadership model that's come out of these leadership experiences. And what I love, I'm driven by the heart and by the social cause, but I'm pragmatic and I know it needs to make business sense, is we used to think that, feelings are just this inconvenient thing that people have. People are feelings-based creatures. When they feel good at work, they do their best work. So the more leaders can do to make their people feel good, they'll make more money for them.
Pretty straightforward. Hey, look, whenever we have conversations like this, I always think about the whataboutisms that people are sitting there
Yes.
and they're going, well, what about this situation where this can't happen? And what
Right.
about that one where it's all very well to say get your work done, but if you're standing on a counter in a shop, fast food outlet where you can't just disappear. Well, how do we have that conversation around those whataboutisms to say, look, it's not going to always work in every circumstance, or indeed for those situations, how do you make it better for that?
I'm so glad you asked me that, because this always happens. Is usually someone in the audience who's like, well, you can't have a surgeon walk out of their surgery at 2:45. I'm like, yeah, I know that. I'm not a moron. So the whatabouts. In fact, I'm very excited. In my book, I literally have an entire section on troubleshooting and overcoming objections. And the way that we apply the principles of #WorkSchoolHours is different in every work scenario. And so it's quite easy probably to get our heads around how this might apply to knowledge workers. And sure, that probably is the easiest place to start. But this is packed full of stories and examples of how you can apply the principles in other sectors. So, for example, retail, because you mentioned the checkout operator there. So no, the checkout operator can't just leave while there's a stack of groceries on the counter. But it's even getting flexible about, well, what are the start and finish times of shifts? Do they have to always be the same? What's the duration of shift? Is there some flexibility there? Maybe they don't all have to be 8-hour shifts. How do we allocate people to shift rosters? Maybe there's some flexibility there where people get to have some autonomy over when they get rostered. And so there's definitely ways that you can apply these principles in a variety of sectors.
Yeah, it gives a little bit, job splitting and all that stuff. And actually, the chances are if people are a little bit flexible, they may not then necessarily need to work the full 40 hours because they're not having to pay for all of the extra childcare, that they're working for. God, is it complicated? Is it complicated, or are we overcomplicating it?
I think actually, I think we're overcomplicating it. So my like when I talk to organizations and they think, yep, in theory this sounds great, Ellen, but oh, this just feels like a nightmare trying to manage everyone's schedule. And I'm like, no, you don't have to do that. You literally just get your team together and say, hey team, these are the outputs we have to deliver as a team. How might we do that in a way that values what everyone else has got going on? And the people solve the problem. It's not a
Yeah,
case of the organizations need to come in up with some complex solution. It's just you get your people involved and how might we do this differently?
yeah. Surely there's got to be some AI-based rostering system that people can put their details in, and you can plug it all in, and out pops a schedule. I would imagine.
Do you know
We live in a
there are
modern
already
world.
apps that do that? There was an amazing farm manager actually down south. He literally designed an app where he kind of pulled staff across a whole lot of different farms, and they would literally put in when they could do different shifts. And there were some people that had a preference for milking cows in the morning. Others were actually more interested in doing, excuse my ignorance, but the other tasks like fence repairs and managing the pasture. And people just inputted. And it's amazing how when you give people autonomy, they're not going to slack off. Like they know all the stuff needs to be done, but they just have a bit more of a say in it.
Brilliant. What are some really great examples of businesses that you might have seen take this on board, that you might not have expected to, and and things have gone well, or indeed they've taken it on board and and things haven't gone well, and what can we learn from that?
Yes, sure. So, okay, if I do that not gone well, is there have been sometimes we think of flexibility as sort of the default is work from home. That is one of the ways of applying flexibility. And I have had organizations where they say, we've done that, but then someone didn't get their work done, so it didn't work. The overcoming it is I say, well, why didn't it work? Maybe it was that there was a training issue with that person. Maybe there was a misunderstanding of what was expected. Or maybe the person actually needs to be performance managed out of the organization, but it's not necessarily the work from home that was the problem. So I think it's quite easy to do it once, have some kind of an issue, and write the whole concept off instead of figuring out, well, what was the actual issue. In terms of organizations doing it well, just like so this is an obvious example, and I'll give you some not so obvious examples. So really simple things like one really big insurance organization, they used to have an 8 o'clock morning for their senior leaders, or sorry, most of their leaders. They just changed it to 9 o'clock. That was like monumentally tiny change, but made such a tangible impact for all these leaders who are trying to join this call while dropping their kids off at school. And it was just a stressful way to start the day. So that's just like a really little thing you can do. Other organizations have changed their like financial quarters in terms of kind of the projects they do each quarter to better align with the school terms. And that's been really impactful so that there's still some work to do on the school holidays, but not kind of as much. In terms of some of the kind of settings you might not expect it to. So one was actually an incredible dairy farmer. They literally planned the milking roster around the school bus. So the people in that community, their milking system was all designed around when the kids got left for the morning on the school bus and when they got home again, so that the parents could be there with them. Another one that I thought was quite cool was a manufacturer. And he, to start with, was sort of scoffed at me. And he's like, well, no, Ellen, we use a lot of machines. There's no way that we can do this. But he took my advice and got the team together and was like, well, how could we do this? And he was like really amazed at when people are motivated to become more productive because they're going to get time back. It's amazing how creative people can be to be more productive.
Oh yeah, look, I tell you what, we can be more creative about getting more time. I'm creative about how to squander my time through procrastination, but that's an entirely different conversation. Hey, look, I'm curious, from where you are now, what was the first thing they taught you on your first day in officer class at Army when you sat down to go, I'm going to be an officer? Was there anything there from that, maybe that first class, that has stuck with you, or indeed that over the years you've looked at and you've thought, what a mistake that piece of advice or suggestion was? Because I'm curious on that longer journey as well.
Ooh. So, okay, I can give you both. So the good advice, and I can't remember if this was day one or not, but very early on is that leadership's about service. So leadership's not about you're in the important position and you've got power and you're more important than others. Not at all. Leadership is about serving the people that you are responsible for caring for. That was sort of the ongoing piece of advice. So one piece of advice, Teresa, that I got that really stuck in my mind that was not good. I would often get feedback in the army from my bosses, and I only ever worked for men in the army. And they would always say, Ellen or Lieutenant Ford, great outcomes, really happy with the mission being achieved, really happy with, you're meeting all your requirements. But we'd just like you to be a little bit less friendly. And I remember one bit I said to the boss, I was like, well, sir, what can I do better? Because I was a thruster then. I'm still a thruster. I like to do well. And I said, sir, what can I do better? And he said, well, Ellen, maybe just don't smile as much at your soldiers. Now, I took that on board and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't think I can be a good leader because I smile. And I learned over time that is complete bollocks. And actually, the best leader anyone can be, which is the lesson I've really learned, is to be themselves. And we are all different. But when we are ourselves, that's when we do our best work and we bring our best to the people that we're leading.
Yeah. And then people know what to expect. It's a constant. Hey, look, I was just thinking during that first part of that conversation that around that importance of a leader, there will be leaders and people in business, upper management or whatnot, who pride themselves on their ability to go and pick their kids up at school every day, and they'll be being seen by people who don't have that flexibility in the business. How important is it to make sure that if something that you pride yourselves on as a part of the business, that's accessible to everybody? Because otherwise, it can, I imagine, really become a bit of a sore point. Or indeed, modeling that behavior, saying, "Hey, look, we have that flexibility." And if the leaders aren't taking it and showing that it's okay to do it, I'm doing a lot of either or questions here, or both of them. How important are those two things?
I love that you said both, actually. So to the first one, it's so important. You don't want to have leaders who are in privileged positions that they're not offering the same flexibility to their team. What I'd say there, though, is it looks different. There are some roles, a leadership position in, say, a head office might be a very different role than someone who might be, say, working on a factory floor. So the way that the principles and flexibility applied will look different. I think we shouldn't be so fixated on, well, we must make it exactly the same for everyone in the organization, because actually everyone's role is different and the way we apply flexibility will be different. But in terms of an overall principle, yes, if you in a leadership position have flexibility, it is really important that you're also working out how you can afford that to all of the people in your team. The flip side question, though, that you asked is actually the one that comes up far more often when I do this work. I remember I ran a workshop recently, and the leader was in the team, and as well as all his team members. And he said, look, I actually could finish work and pick up my kids from school a couple of afternoons a week, but I don't want to do that because I don't want my team to then think I'm shirking off, and I don't want them to feel. And all of them literally just stopped in their tracks, and they were like, boss, we wish you would do that, because then it would actually mean that we have permission to do it. And he's like, yeah, but I've told you have permission. And I'm like, yeah, but unless we see our boss actually do it and role model it, it's really hard to truly believe that it's okay for us to do this. So, yeah.
Show, don't tell. Brilliant. Hey, sounds amazing. And then I'm sure there are people listening thinking, oh, how can I learn more about that? There's the book, obviously.
Yes.
How do they get that? Is there a course? Can I take a course?
Yes. Oh gosh, thank you for asking me this. I'm very excited. So I have written a book, #WorkSchoolHours, a revolution for parents' workplaces in the world. And yes, there's an online course, 2 editions. One is specifically targeted for parents, and the other is specifically targeted at people leaders, which of course could actually be the same person, but different focus. And these are all available on my website, which is my full name, ellenjoanford.com. And the main work that I actually do is I do speaking, and I facilitate leadership training for how we do this. But I just wanted to say one note. I really want people to get this book and read it, and I want them to do the course and learn it. But the honest truth is, my goal isn't to sell books. My goal is for people to actually do something with this, and to make workplaces of the future better than what they are now.
Yeah. It's worth it, isn't it? I was at cross country yesterday, as I said, and it was, and I've got school assembly coming up this week. I'm very privileged, and I do think about that every time I go and see the other parents who are there. And we have we're at a, well, I mean, we're urban, but we're at a sort of almost a rural school. It's amazing how many people have the flexibility to turn up. What's the single greatest moment that you've treasured that you thought if I didn't have this in practice, I would have missed? Can you think of one? Putting you on the spot.
Oh, I mean, so many. I just think, especially my 6-year-old Toby, who's now at school, the going to his, yeah, like swimming, sports, cross country. So I'm kind of wrapping all those in together. Being able to attend those events and having his little face light up when he sees that I've arrived, that it's just priceless. Yeah, I arrive and I can see him looking around for me, and then we make eye contact and he's just beaming that his mum's there. And yeah, that stuff matters. Like, I think, 20 years from now, when they've grown up and left home, I'll look back and feel so happy and joyful that that was part of my life.
Brilliant. So you may be listening to this and you may be in the position to be able to do that for yourself, or more importantly, to enable others to have those special little moments as well. Hashtag, what have we got? Hashtag work school hours. I'll tell you the thing that shocked me the most. I thought that was a cat behind you. Then it lifted its head and it turns out it's a dog. I was absolutely shocked, Alan. Marvelous. Again, it's and again that's one of those other little things that happened in the last 3 or 4 years. This ability to look behind people into their own personal lives. You can see mine today because my computer system fell apart. You had to see my actual world rather than my green screen. So for long-time viewers slash listeners, welcome to my world. Hey, I share it with my child, Dr. Joan Ford. Look, it is a really important issue, and it may not you may not be able to get people to be able to do it every day, but a couple of times a week or on those special occasions. Swimming sports doesn't happen every week. Cross country doesn't happen every week, but if you can get to those and enable people get to them, all the best. Hey, look, thank you. What's next for you?
Um, Getting this to go global and for people to genuinely change how they do things.
Well, who knows? Maybe this will go viral based upon the fact that your cat is a dog. Look, I don't know. You never know what it takes. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I do really appreciate all the work that you do in all the many facets. So for us, for now, we're going to let you get on with implementing going global, and we're going to let our listeners getting on with implementing, having a little bit more time around their school hours. So a massive thanks to Dr. Joan Ford. You can buy the book, do the course, website details, of course. Any questions, you can contact HRNZ. They will point you in the right direction. If you are new to HR Chats with Meter Radar, welcome aboard. There is plenty in the archives. And as we say every week, if there is something that you would like us to address in these chats, then just let HRNZ know and we'll look to put a session together for you. From me, for now, that's all. Goodbye.